Hey, Jack, Kirk, good to see you guys. Looks like there might be a couple other people in here as well. Depends if there's a late gig. California, Connecticut, New York. I'm guessing it's cold in Connecticut. I'm guessing it's beautiful in California. It's a little bit freezing in my apartment today. Hence me trying not to spill my overfilled cup of coffee. Anyways, it looks super intimate today. At least so far, there's just a few of us. So I'm going to shed, but I'm here to help if anyone has any questions. Uh, let me know. Rob, what's up, man? Ran the wood stove last night, though. Oh, that sounds really nice. We just have radiator heat. I don't have any control over it. Sometimes they blast it. I literally sleep. Last night I was asleep with my AC on, which is so stupid. I would open the window, except it's too loud outside. I wouldn't be able to sleep. But um, yeah, I slept with the heater and the AC on last night because the heater's for the whole building. It's radiator. And then other times, like right now, it's not even running. So I think it has something to do with the time of the day. They're required by law to run it at certain times of day if it falls below certain temperatures. But man, nice wood stove sounds really good. Sergio, what's up, man? Good to see you. Practice after I tune. That's the other thing about temperature here. My guitar does not appreciate the radiator heat and or the temperature. Who knows? Every winter it freaks out. Mark, what's up, man? I heard it was beautiful in Charlotte recently. Working on the concept in confirmation of the E-flat triad and D triad over A minor, D7. Any tips on embellishing this concept? Yeah, that's a good one. Steven, what's up, man? Miles, good to see you. Matt, what's up, man? Feels like it's been a while. Howard, hey. Do you intersperse the dominant chord subs, etc., with chromatics and diatonic chords in the melodic triad philosophy? I will come back to that in a minute. Let me hit Jack's question first. It sounds like they might be kind of similar. So let me start with Jack's and then I'll come back and touch on that. Nick, what's up, man? Good to see you. Okay. E flat, D triad over the 2-5, A minor, D7, G. Any tips on embellishing this concept? So, for those who have not gotten all the way up to confirmation yet in the tune studies, if that hasn't unlocked, what Jack is referring to is something that Bird uses um, in that tune. He does it again, and I think it's in Moose the Mooch. I don't know. I've been analyzing a variety of different Bird heads recently, and have been seeing a lot of overlap. This is one of those things. Right, what is that? The end of the second A section. So he kind of does it in the first A section also, but it's a little bit more subtle. It's not quite as easy to spot. But in the second A section, he literally plays a full-blown E flat major triad, and then the fifth and third of the D major triad. Right, you could almost think of it as a triad pair. I wouldn't think of it as a triad pair necessarily, because I don't really think he's never using it going back and forth. It's always E flat to D. So if I remember correctly, is it A half diminished or is it just A minor? I think it's just A minor. Yeah, it's just A minor, D7, and he's resolving us to G minor because that's the 3-6-2. Confirmation is in the key of F major, and over the A minor chord, he's playing an E flat major triad, which gives you if you want to think of it as a minor 7 flat 5, you could, because the E flat, it could be a flat 5 or it could be a sharp 11. And then we also get the flat 9. Now, I don't really think any of that matters because I don't think he's actually actively trying to play over an A minor here. I think he's implying, instead of A minor, I think he's implying an E flat dominant, resolving down a half step to D dominant. Right? This is straight out of our chord movement ideas, our dominant chord movement. This is the tritone subdominant that wants to go to D. Okay, the flat 2 dominant. Oh, my radiator finally turned back on. Hopefully it'll be warm in here in a minute. So I wouldn't get too caught up worrying about the complexity of what an E flat major triad superimposed over A minor 7 is, like in terms of coming up with voicings or anything like that. We could, but it's not a harmonious sound. That B flat note, that flat 9 over A minor, to me is not harmonious. It's two different things. They both want to go to D7, which is why it works. So the better way to think of this is just to think, okay, I'm just playing over an E flat dominant, a tritone subdominant that wants to resolve down a half step to D7, which is now the actual dominant that wants to take us to G minor. So from that perspective, before we get into embellishing it or ornamenting it, I would first just start off getting used to pure triads. For those of you who are newer with us who need to, I would say play the half note game a lot. Learn to really think your way through this with the half note game first. Make sure you can voice lead. Then we can start being a little bit more free with our rhythms. I added a couple embellishment notes there, sorry. A couple more just pure triad. The next embellishment that I would focus on is our primary quadratonics. Okay, not based on A minor, based on an E flat dominant. So the primary tension note for this would be tension 2 for E flat, tension flat 2 for D, to G minor, tension 2. Okay, that would be a really good starting point for developing more phrases and ornamented ideas that are very not so obvious that it's just a triad anymore. Beyond that, I would stick, especially because it's happening relatively quickly. We don't have a lot of time. I wouldn't go beyond adding the primary tension. I wouldn't worry about the secondary tension. Uh, Not in the beginning for like a long time. Eventually, you might want to add in the tension flat 7, which would be the secondary tension note for both of these dominants. But it's really not necessary. I would start with the primary quadrant. I would start with the triad, then play around with the primary tension notes, and then of course leading tones and chromaticism, are great. You can always add that stuff in. Right, that's just the leading tone to E flat. Okay. Leading tone in D major. You can even do this stuff without the quadratonics happening, just triads. I'm starting on the downbeat on a D natural note over an E flat major triad. That's tension major 7, but it's really not. It's just a leading tone. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right? When we're dealing with quadratonics, not scales, you can get away with a lot of wrong chord tones on strong beats. Like you don't have to always put the 1 3 5 on the downbeat when you're dealing with leading tones and chromaticism inside of a triad or a primary quadratonic, because every other note is so powerful and so important that it'll kind of make it work. Okay, and then the chromaticism, same idea. You can just connect any two notes from E flat, voice lead to D major. Okay, that's a tough one because it's a perfect fourth. It's the largest interval we have in a triad. Connecting it chromatically, especially if you only have 2 beats, you gotta like fly through it. You can't pluck every note. You gotta. There, I'm just using the same finger and sliding down. Before I was doing a bunch of pull-offs and a slide. Okay, these are all little ideas. I would just go very slow it down. Start with the triad. Make sure you can voice lead very confidently. If you can't voice lead, you're wasting your time on any of this other ornamental, embellished stuff. Excuse me. So start there, and then you can go one of two routes. One is to play around with the primary tension notes, okay, which are notated in the PDF. Those will give a little bit more of like a lyrical phrase-based kind of a sound, like a more diatonic set of phrases. And or you might want to do them separate a little bit, play around with leading tones and or chromaticism. Okay, those are going to give kind of the more legato, fluid, beboppy kind of stuff. Ideally, you would want to be able to get to the point where they're both happening together. So I would work on them each separate, like just do triads first, then separate it out to either the primary tension note, the quadratonic, or leading tones and chromaticism. Like do each of them, but do them separately. And then as you're getting more comfortable with both separately, then you can bring them together. And now you have all 12 notes, but in a way where you're playing phrases and still implying the harmony. That would be my recommendation. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. Where did we go with these? I think it resolves to G7. In the first A, yes, I was playing more over the second A, which it goes straight to G minor there, I believe, because my mind went to the second A because it's a more obvious um, application of this. Like when you look at Bird's Melody, if you are still, especially if you're still newer-ish with us, you might not see triads and quadratonics so obviously in the tunes. In the first A, the way he plays it is pretty tricky to notice that it's an E flat move into a D. In the second A, it's very like he just plays literally 1 3 5 and then 5 3 on D major. So that's where I started. My mind went right to the second A, which is why I was resolving a G minor because I'm pretty sure in that one. Yeah. Um, Mark, it says all I'm seeing is this live event is no longer available, which is very strange because try reloading it. Because I'm definitely still live. The count clock is on my screen and it looks like other people are seeing me. So I'm not sure why it's not letting you, but definitely try reloading it first. And Nick and everyone else who's recommended the same thing. Thank you guys. All right. Howard asked a question a minute ago that I wanted to jump to next. Do you intersperse the dominant chord subs, etc., with chromatics and diatonic chords in the melodic triad philosophy? So I thought you were asking something similar to Mark, not Mark, Jack. But now I don't think you are. Now it sounds like you're asking specifically about chord movement and comping. I think. Let me know if I'm misunderstanding that. Do you intersperse dominant chord subs, etc., with chromatics and diatonic chords in the melodic triad philosophy? So the answer is yes. The melodic triad philosophy is not. Oh, yeah, comping, cool. It's not like a dogmatic thing. It's the best way to think of melodic triads is it's just a shovel, and I'm just trying to show you how to pick up the shovel and hold it and start digging. There are best practices, things that I do recommend along the way, that I think like, hey, there's more gold over on that hill than on that one. So let's go have you dig over there, not over here. Little things like that, but it doesn't mean you're not allowed to dig over here. You can dig wherever you want to. So on a philosophical level, anything is allowed. Anytime I give rules, they're primarily meant to be sort of best practices for you to play with and then try to prove me wrong. Most of my ideas came from trying to prove any and all of my teachers wrong and either finding a better way, which is rare, but it does happen, or realizing, okay, there's no better way. Like this is ideal. Not because I trust them necessarily, but because I can't find anything better than it. So always feel free to break any rule I give you, but start with the rule and try and break it by starting with it and seeing what you can find that's better than it. That said, in terms of specific things you're asking, first thing I'll point out is that I very rarely, if ever, think about chord sub. Right? You use the term chord subs. I'm very rarely, if ever, thinking about chord substitutions. I'm thinking about harmonic pathways. So I'm trying to get from point A to point B, and I might use some chords that are not in the real book and that other people might not be considering to get me there, but I'm not substituting anything. I'm just taking a different route. Okay. It might seem like not a big difference to you, Howard, and maybe to other people, but it's a very big difference. Okay. That E flat chord is not a sub for A minor. It's just a different way of getting to D. And it's a healthier way of thinking, I think, because it gets us again out of this idea of vertical stacking, which is helpful. If you don't understand 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and chord scale theory, it's worth studying that stuff. But music happens horizontally through time. Okay. Most of the greatest music that's ever been created happens through time. It carries us forward, it grabs our attention and it pulls us forward. It creates anticipation and movement and stories. It's very difficult to tell a story by running up and down. It's much more natural to tell a story where the plot moves us through time. So there are instances where I'll do an actual chord sub, but usually what I'm trying to help you learn has to do with horizontal movement through time. So it's about how do we use chord movement to take us from point A to point B. And there are a lot of different ways to do that, okay, to get from any one place to another. But it's not about substituting things in and out. It's about learning how to develop movement through time. With that said, assuming we're on the same page and you're with me on that, yes, you absolutely can intersperse dominant, chromatic, diatonic, and diminished. They are all chord movement is I lay them out as 4 different types of movement, but it's not so black and white. It's not like here's one type, here's a different type, here's a different, here's a different. They're all kind of related to each other and part of the same thing in different ways. So as a quick example, okay, this is a 2-5-1-6 in C major, D minor, C, B7, B flat 7, A7, D minor. Okay, so what is this? This is dominant movement. The D minor is rule 3 from dominant movement. It's tagged onto the G7. Effectively, a 2-5-1 is just a tonic chord with dominant movement to get us there. So the G7 creates tension that wants to spit us out at the 1. The D minor, the 2 chord, is just the 2 is we're just tagging that onto the G7. So that's just rule 3. Okay. Moving to rule 1, resolving to the tonic. So effectively, the whole 2-5-1 is dominant movement condensed down into a chord progression. Now, the 6 chord that we would put at the end of that, if we want to loop this around, is again dominant movement. Where are we trying to get? We're trying to get from C to D minor, but it's pretty boring to just move from C to D minor. How do we tell the story of creating harmonic motion and tension that spits us out onto a D minor so it feels like we've been taken somewhere? There's a lot of ways to get there. Right? That's a much more interesting story than okay. These are just different chord movements that take me from the 1 chord to the 2 chord. The classic one is dominant movement. That's why I like to start everybody on dominant movement and try and get everyone obsessed and addicted to it because it's such a big part of our tradition. The classic one is you just go to the 6th chord, C, A7. Why? Because A7 is the dominant chord, the 5, that would want to resolve to D minor. So it creates harmonic tension, resolves us to our target chord. We could, rather than just playing C, A7, we could add some tension chords to get us from C to A7. And a very classic version of this would be to start on C7, B7, and descend chromatically through B flat 7 to A7 to D minor. Okay. If you listen to any classic old school jazz, that should sound pretty familiar. Is that dominant movement? Yes, because each of these is the tritone sub, the flat 2 dominant that wants to resolve to the next one. C7 is, I'm not playing C6 or major 7, I'm playing C dominant 7 here. Why? Because it wants to resolve to B7. Where does B7 want to resolve? B flat 7. This is all rule 2, flat 2 dominance. B flat 7 wants to resolve to A7, right? which now takes us back to D minor. So now we have a 2-5-1-6 on loop where I'm never playing the full-blown tonic chord, because the second I get to C, I've switched to a tension chord. I'm playing C dominant, not C6, not C major. So the tonic sound is now a dominant that wants to move, so it never feels fully stabilized. We could even get rid of the C root note if we wanted to. But my point being here is that we could absolutely classify this as dominant movement, because when you descend dominants in half steps, it's just following rule 2. It's just the flat 2 dominant tritone sub. You could also argue that it's chromatic movement, that I want to get to A7, so I'm just approaching it chromatically. So that's the same thing. It's chromatic and it's dominant. It's from both areas of our key signature, right? Does that make sense? Chromatic or dominant. We could add 2 chords into it. We could overshoot the A7. That is chromatic. That is not dominant. Dominants don't resolve up a half step. So you could argue the first half is dominant or chromatic. And then when I go beyond it and come back up, now it's chromatic. I could do that. I could go below it, jump to a C sharp diminished. C sharp diminished chords, ideally in their strongest resolution, would be up a half step to D minor. So now I'm using dominant, chromatic, and diminished all to get me to the D minor chord. Okay. None of these are substitutes for a C chord or an A7. Like B7, this is what I mean about subbing versus movement. B7 is not a substitution chord for C6. Like the idea of a substitution chord is that it fulfills the same function, but with a different set of pitches. This doesn't fill the same function. It's not tonic. C6 is a tonic chord. It's meant to give us stability and home base. B7 is not that in the slightest. Its whole purpose in life, for now, in this context, is to get us to B flat 7. That's its only concern. Or to E7. Right, that's C7, F7. Sorry, C7, B7, E7, E flat 7, D minor. Why? Dominant movement. I know B7 can go to E7, and I know E7 can go to E flat, and E flat can go to D minor. Or after the E7, instead of going to E flat dominant, I can go to E flat minor, and now I'm using chromatic approach chords, or a chromatic approach chord. Right? E flat minor 7 resolves to D minor. Super cool. E7, E flat minor, D minor. E minor, E flat minor, D minor. They all work, and they can all work together with each other. But similar to what I was saying to Jack about learning to embellish the E flat major triad to the D major triad that Bird was using in confirmation, we want to learn these things in segments. So none of the chord movement types, the 4 that I discussed, none of them are completely isolated, black and white, separate from anything else. But it's best to, in the beginning, to learn them as separate entities until we gain control over them. So we know what they sound like, we know how to use them. And then once we know how to use them, we can start mixing and matching them. But very difficult to learn 4 different ideas at the same time, as opposed to learning one idea, then a second idea, then a third idea, then a fourth idea, and then letting them commingle with each other. Always start with the simplest, give your central nervous system, your brain, your neuromuscular system, one thing at a time to chew on, and it'll learn it much quicker. Let's check in. I want to make sure people are able to see what's happening here. Steven is also saying nothing's available. Everything fine here for Kirk. David, good here too. Jack, I think it was also G7. I responded that earlier. Weird. I don't know why that's happening, Mark. Nick, did you reload the browser? Serge, Mark, try refreshing the home screen. Howard comping. So we're taking different streets to get to the pub. Exactly. Hey Miguel, what's up, man? Steven, I can't seem to overcome technical difficulties here either, despite all the efforts to refresh. I guess it's something on my end. Better luck next time. Man, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'll try and email both of you guys. Who was it? It was Mark and Steven. I'll try and make a mental note to hit you guys up. Yeah, if in fact, it looks like maybe they can't hear me, but it looks like they can see the chats, which is super weird. I'm gonna type a response to them. Back to the questions. Howard, you're welcome. Hope that helps. Cool. I think I'm caught up on questions. I don't see any others at the moment. I feel so bad that it's not working for some people, though. It's always something with these matrices, with these matrices. Ben, what's up, man? Had the same problem at first, refreshing, fixed it. Maybe open the page in a new browser window. Yeah. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes just a different browser altogether. Sometimes it sounds so stupid, but sometimes turning the computer off and then back on helps. I don't know why. Sometimes I'll do Zoom calls with people and they, for the life of them, cannot figure out how to get their audio to turn on. Like I just can't hear anything. And they'll hang up the Zoom call and call back in without resetting anything, without restarting anything. They'll just hang up and call back in. And all of a sudden we can hear them. Like I have no idea why computers do the things they do. I think that's, if I miss anyone's question, let me know. I don't see any other questions at the moment, so I'm just going to come back to what I was practicing at the beginning of this, but super happy to put my own practice on pause if you guys have questions. I'm just doing a little bit of shell voicing Liquid Harmony, which I have not, I've kind of sprinkled into our program a little bit, but I'm still working on trying to develop like a very clear-cut path before I try and offer it to you guys. I don't want to offer it too in depth without first making it very systematic. You know how I am. Steven, Firefox is working for you. Safari and Chrome, not so much. Awesome. I mean, not awesome they're not working, but that you found one that did work. Yeah, when you and Mark were first talking, I was like verbally responding, not really thinking about the fact that you probably weren't hearing me, because I saw other people commenting and it looked like you were chatting with other people. So, but I'm glad it's working now. Rob, your video resolution's a bit fuzzy. Would you explain some of the voicings and chord movements that you're doing? Sure. Matthew, Stella Half Note Game, can you run through the B section for me? I feel like I get lost in the sound of the 3 B flat triads in a row after the E flat 6. Sure, let me come back to that. I'll start with Rob first. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So would I explain some of the voicings and chord movement that I'm doing? Yes, the voicings are just shell voicings. This is why I love the fundamentals so much. Like once you, there's not that much to learn, right? A couple, like, what is there, like, is it 9 different basic shell voicings? I always forget and lose track. However many there are, there's somewhere between 9 and 12. Once you learn those shapes in 2 positions, that's it. Root 5, root 6. We can start making music pretty quickly. Then that foundation's there for us. We can just start manipulating it, and pretty quickly, things start to sound way more advanced and complicated than just we would assume based on the idea that it's the fundamentals. So all I'm doing is playing. Kind of going back to what Howard was asking about the different types of chord movement, I'm doing diatonic chord movement for the most part. There was a little bit of other stuff happening there. I think I threw some some 2-5-1s in. I started exploring a little bit of diminished movement, but it was mainly diatonic, G major, chord scale. G major 7, A minor 7, B minor 7, all with shell voicings. C major 7, D7, E minor 7, F sharp half diminished 7, which just looks like a minor 7, G major 7. Okay. If you don't know your diatonic chord scale theory, this will be pretty difficult. It takes a lot of effort and work and memorization and fretboard visualization to get to the point where you can do this in all 12 keys, which is one of the reasons I put diatonic movement last in our set of 4 movement types, because it's the least applicable. Usually when we're playing over standards, we don't have enough time to really sit inside of a key and just dance around like this. But when we do have the time to do that, it can be extremely helpful. So it takes a lot of work on the front end, and it does not pay off quite as much as something like dominant or diminished or even chromatic pays off, in my opinion. All I'm doing is dancing. I shouldn't say all. There was a few different techniques I was doing, and this is why I haven't made any kind of videos or courses about this yet, because I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the kind of best practices and rules are and like the cleanest order to learn this stuff in. But to get you started, I'm basically dancing between the 7th and the 6th of each chord. So shell voicings in general, we think of them as root 3rd 7th. That's a great starting point, but it's not always true. So a sus shell voicing is root 4th 7th. A 6th shell voicing, like a C6, is root 6 or root 3rd 6th, not root 3rd 7th. So what I was doing is dancing between G major 7. Sorry, I guess I thought I heard a noise. G major 7 and G6. Okay. If you do this on root 6 string set, the top and bottom voice ring out the whole time and the middle voice moves. That's why I refer to this as a form of liquid harmony. Liquid harmony is not simply playing a triad with a tension and resolving that tension. Liquid harmony is an umbrella term I use to describe any type of technique that will allow us to play a voicing where we have some kind of singular voice moving. What the hell is that noise? Sounds like there's a puppy running around in my apartment. I hope it's not a giant rat. Maybe it's my upstairs neighbor. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Anyways, keep your fingers crossed for me. Okay, I'm just playing the whole voicing and then moving one note, either the 7 down to the 6 or the 6 up to the 7. I'm a big fan of the 4 directions. The 4 directions are up, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. Okay, the 4 directions come from the idea of putting 2 different movements together. So you can either go up, then up again, down, then down again, up, then down, then up. Those are the only 4 ways you can move when you only get ups and downs and you do 2 movements together. Up, up. Up, 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 up. Good God. I'm glad you guys can hear that because it's freaking me the fuck out. It is huge. What in God's name? God, I hope that's a dog. Oh, man. Up, up. Up, up. Up, up. Up, up. Up, up. Okay. We can descend this same chord scale, still doing up, up. Up, up. Now we have... Right right? We have our chords are moving down, but this inner voice keeps leaping down and then moving up. Okay. Down, down, the exact opposite. Sounds super hip. Ascending, descending, it's still going to sound cool, but now the individual voice movement is descending and the chord is descending, right? Versus if you descend the individual voice while the chords ascend, now you have contrary motion, which is always going to sound cooler than non-contrary motion. Here, I'm just getting rid of the top note so you can hear the individual voices more clearly. Here it is with the top voice added back in. Okay. Down, or descending, I should say. Now, up, down. Up, down. Up, down. Up, down. Up, down. Up, down. Descending, up, down. Down, up. Right, down, up. Down, up. Okay. That was the majority of what I was doing. There are other techniques for this. I was using some leading tones. Right? Now we're really starting to borrow some of our melodic tension ideas. There's leading tones, there's chromaticism, there's other types of chord movement. So I was playing around with some diminished ideas. Again, I'm still trying to work out some of the more systematic approaches to those, but a good starting point is pick one chord scale. G major is a great one because it puts us root 6 all the way at the bottom and gives us a full octave to work. And then dance between the 6 and the 7, either up, up, down, down, or down, up. Okay, ascending and descending. Difficult to get it into a tune because it's time consuming. You're not going to be able to play a full octave up and back and then move to another chord. That's why it takes a lot of time and why I put it as the last chord movement type, diatonic specifically. This would be a mutation of diatonic chord movement. We're just adding a liquid harmony element to it. At some point, I'm going to come up with a more systematic approach for this, and it will start getting presented in our program. But this is a good starting point. That's what I was messing around with. Matthew, you're going to come back to Stella in a second. I just want to read through, make sure no one's freaking out about anything I was just playing. Nick, sounds great. Visualizing the quadratonic shape over the shells is a skill worth mastering. Yeah, again, shells, triads, if you can get those two things mastered and learn to be playful and creative with how you apply them, no one will have the slightest clue that you're just using really basic, simple fundamentals. It's kind of the beauty of it. And learning to see those two together, just like you just start getting like Bill Evans, Rosenwinkel, Jim Hall kind of stuff. It's pretty wild. It still freaks me out how easily accessible those advanced sounds are. Jack, so you're using the inner moving voice in the shell voicings. Yes, it doesn't always have to be the inner voice. In this particular setup, it is. We could do it with the top or the bottom voice, but unlike triads where there's a primary tension note, I guess if there was a primary tension note to dance with, it would be between the 6 and the 7 with shell voicing. Um, but it doesn't have to be. It's a good starting point, and if you play it in root 6 position, it will always be in the middle of the three voices, which is the hippest note to create literally inner voice movement with. You can put it on the top note, but then you're just going to sound like you're playing kind of like chord melody type stuff. You're also going to sometimes get that interval, that minor 9 that I'm always kind of talking about avoiding. Not avoiding forever, but just learning to recognize it's a very tense interval, and we want to learn to hear it and to know that it's there, so that we can either avoid it and or learn to resolve it when we do play it. Okay. So that's also possible, and even the root is possible. But the middle voice is definitely the hippest, and I think most musical is certainly as a starting point. Rats, you can hear that. Yeah, crazy. I hope it's just Bird's Ghost. Good God, I still hear it. So G6 to G major 7, that's one way to think about it. Yeah, you could think of it as two different chords, or might seem subtle, but you guys know I'm kind of obsessed with subtlety. One way to think of it is G6 to G7. Another way is to think of it as a G chord with inner voice movement, which I think is a little bit better because the goal is to make it sound like one chord voicing with an individual voice movement versus thinking of it and expressing it as two different chords. We do not want to play all three notes. That sounds nowhere near as musical as that. We want the root and third ringing out the whole time. We just want it to sound like a tiny little piece of melody inside of a chord voicing, which happens to be the 6 to the major 7. But I personally would not necessarily refer to it as G6 and G major 7. But that's the idea. G6, G7, A minor 6, for example. Yeah, so that would be, yeah, I think you get the gist of it. So when I say up, I'm just lumping two different chords. I'm lumping G and A minor together. So up, up from the 6 up to the 7. Down, 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 down would be from the 7 down to the 6. Down from the 7 down to the 6 again. Up, down would be up, down. Right? And then down, up would be down, up. And each one, when you string them together, creates a slightly longer melody. Now, instead of just a tiny little 2-note movement, now it almost sounds like a 4-note melody happening inside. Why? Because I'm lumping two chords together. Instead of just thinking isolated chords, I'm putting two of them together. We don't always have to play it that way. Okay. If you're applying this in a tune and you just have one beat, you might not have time to do that. You can still insert that individual voice movement, but practicing it in terms of, again, this idea of the 4 directions it's a good way to think, I think. So do the chord and then let the moving not ring out. G-ness, G6. I like that, G-ness. It's a G-ness chord. G6, G major 7, for example, or G sus to G, for example. Yeah. So let the chord ring out with the inner voice movement. You can either play the two notes and then play the note that's going to move. That's fine. Or what I was doing was playing what appeared to be a 3-note voicing, but then one of the notes disappeared and moved to another note. Right. So like playing a G6 and moving, and it lands on G major 7. Okay. I skipped a question that I wanted to come back to. Oh, Matt, still working on Stella half note game. Can you run through the B section for me? I feel like I get lost in the sound of the 3 B flat triads in a row after the E flat triad over the G7. Gotcha. Yeah. So that is a little bit tricky. The half note game is kind of ideal when we're really just focusing on pure triad and learning a voice lead. And because like what makes what makes this melodic progression work is that we have different quadratonic, different tension notes, which create phrases, and a chord movement happening behind us. If we're not playing that chord movement and if we're not relying on the tension notes, then yeah, you're just stuck with what is it, like 6 measures of playing a B flat triad. So you're not really practicing what the half note game is all about. The half note game is meant to help us voice lead, right? It accomplishes a few other things along the way, but its primary focus for us, like the reason we want to do it, is to learn a voice lead through a set of triads. So this, you certainly could apply it to this. I'm not telling you not to, but it's not providing us the most ideal practice scenario to practice over. To develop music with. So let me loop the. God, I wish they would stop honking. I don't know if you guys can hear that too, between the rats and the honking. To good God. Let me loop this chord progression real quick. 1 second. I kind of feel like there maybe is a little bit of value to playing the half note game over this section. You just might need to do it with a backing track so you can really hear the chords moving. And then it becomes a game of learning to feel those final 3 chords as a very simple movement. Like it's not anything complicated. It's a 2 chord. If we're talking harmonically, we're in the key of B flat, we're headed to B flat. So it's a 2 chord, moving to that backdoor dominant, the flat 7 dominant, not a dominant chord with a flat 7. Every dominant chord has a flat 7. A dominant chord built on the flat 7 of a key, right? A flat in the key of B flat major. Okay, so learning to kind of navigate through that with one triad, I think there's kind of some value to that. It helps simplify the bridge down. So it makes it feel like it's just a 4 chord move into a 1 chord. That's it. Melodically speaking, E flat is the 4 triad, move into B flat, the 1. Up to the 4. To the 1, and then just hanging on the 1. I wonder if we can get away with the blue triad, B flat minor. Almost kind of works. So I think there's a little bit of value to that in terms of learning to feel the bridge as something simpler than it really is. Pretty quickly, what I would recommend you do, because again, the main drive behind the half note game is learning to see the triads moving and voice leading through them. So practice E flat, voice leading to B flat, but once you're in B flat, you're not really getting too much value by just sitting on half notes for 6 measures. Again, it can help you feel the bridge form wise with a bigger beat, and it can help you simplify it down. But pretty quickly, what I would do is recommend you move away from pure half note and move into playing around with a little bit more rhythmic freedom, and eventually adding in those melodic tension notes. Okay, start first just with rhythmic freedom. You can overemphasize the beats 1 and 3 if you want, but ornament it a little bit rhythmically, and then you can add in the tension notes and leading tones, things like that. So here's just pure triads, half note game with rhythmic ornamentation. Right? 1, 3. Can you hear how rhythmically I'm playing more than half notes, but I'm emphasizing beats 1 and 3. There was a big old leading tone. Okay, leading tones, chromaticism. Here's the quadratonics. Okay. I think that would be a good sort of progression to work your way through it. You know, sit with the half note game a little bit if you need to, primarily focused on learning to voice lead from E flat to B flat, and learning to feel the bridge as a very simple section, right? I know it might not seem like it at first because you're kind of doing this altered dominant to the 2 chord. Then there's this funny little like flat 7 backdoor dominant, finally the tonic. But really, melodically speaking, it's the 4 chord to the 1 chord. And then you just sit on the 1 chord for a while. So start with the half note game just to feel that simplicity. and to get the voicing down, then add in some leading tones, some chromaticism, some rhythmic ornamentation. I think that's going to kind of be your best bet for learning to play over that. Yeah, that's what I would do. All right, let's check in, kind of wrap up. Mark, so great to have you back, and I'm so happy you tried Firefox. You and Steven were both having issues, and Steven came back a few minutes ago with the same update that he was trying the other browsers, they weren't working, and then he tried Firefox and it worked. I don't know why that's the case. I'm streaming through Chrome. That's usually the browser I use for YouTube, things like that. But I'm glad it worked, and this will be archived in the underground. You can watch it later. I'm not sure why that was happening, so apologies for that. Rob, do you use tension notes similarly? I guess you're still asking about liquid harmony in terms of harmonic quadratonics and the idea of keeping two notes ringing while one note resolves. If that's what you mean, yes. Liquid harmony is when we have a full chord voicing ringing out, but inside of that, one of the notes is moving. That's the concept of liquid harmony. It's meant to imply a melodic movement while a voicing is ringing out, which is different than playing a melody and then harmonizing with a chord. It's different than chord melody, where you're playing a melody and each note gets its own voicing to harmonize it. The idea is, can you express a chord voicing and have a chord, an individual voice moving inside of it? So assuming that's what you're referring to, yeah, it's basically the same concept. There are other techniques for developing different things, but that's the gist of liquid harmony, whether it's triad based with quadratonics or shell voicing. Matt, awesome. Glad to hear it, man. Let me know how it goes. Howard, thanks for the session. Hope to see you on Wednesday. Yeah, I'll be mentorship will be on for Tuesday and Wednesday. Study group members will be back in a couple weeks. For those of you who have been in the monthly tune studies since we launched it, there should be a new tune in there for you. Billy's Bounce, depending on how long you've been in the program. And mentorship people, my plan is in January, sometime this month, to get the unlocked version of that for you guys. So you'll just be able to move around at any pace you want to. If you want to jump between tunes, you can move out of order. It'll just be yours, like a little tune library, tune vault to work through. Hit me up if you guys need anything. I will be back in a couple weeks for our next session. Thank you for some really cool questions today and for working with me with those technical issues. I have no idea why the other browsers weren't working. I guess I would recommend using Firefox from now on with these, but I don't know why that would be the case. I watch YouTube videos on all my browsers and they all seem to work fine, so I don't know why that was happening. But I do appreciate the patience and trying to figure it out on your end. I'm glad both of you did. I'm going to archive this so you guys can watch it later if there was anything you wanted to go back that you missed. Thanks for hanging. Thanks for the great questions. As always, happy practicing, and I'll be in touch for our next session soon. See you guys.